Everyone, it's Terry with Terry's Tidbits in the Des Moines, Iowa user group. And going back a little bit, June would have been May. In our May user group meeting, I'm a little slow at getting some of my videos uploaded lately. If you haven't noticed, my apologies. But in our May user group, we had Michelle Ehrich come and speak to us on the topic of project management, and we had a great session. I do a lot to introduce her in the video, so I'm just going to shut up, let you get right to the video from here. All right, welcome everybody. This is our June 15th user group meeting. So welcome to that. We have Michelle Ehrich with us. Did I get that right, Michelle?
Yes.
Good. Awesome. We were just talking about how I don't do names well because I never had phonics class and it wouldn't help me with her name anyway. But Michelle is here to talk to us about Agile and some of the things that she's learned. She is at DotDash Meredith. If you're in the Des Moines area, you'd probably just know them as Meredith. But they are part of the DotDash world. And I've had the privilege of working with her now for maybe 9 months or so, 6 months?
I started in end of August.
And so it's been fun working with her, and she is fantastic at all of this Agile and project management stuff. She is a project management professional, so she is certified on this topic. And she really would like this to be kind of an open forum, conversational. As she goes through, she's going to share a variety of things with us, but feel free to unmute yourselves if you're not in a noisy place and ask questions and interact with us as we go through today's session. I think that would be fantastic. And we'll get her started right after I go through the rest of these slides. So Clarissa and myself, we are your user group leaders for the admin groups here in Des Moines. You can reach out to us at either of those Twitter handlers. Karen and Joseph. Joseph, what do you got going on the nonprofit world?
Oh my goodness, we have been growing like crazy. We are running out of space when we're having our coffee meetings, which is great. Awesome. We're experimenting with the nonprofit group and meeting in a variety of different places. And if you're interested in joining us, because we're always looking for folks, even if you're not associated directly with a nonprofit, if you're just an admin, you want to come and learn and make connections, we'd love to have you. We're meeting on July 13th. It's a Thursday, and this time we're doing an afternoon, and we'll likely be meeting on a patio to take advantage of some beautiful weather. So if you are interested, we haven't posted the event yet. I will do that by the end of the week, and we would love to have you come and join us on July 13th.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joseph. And we have Jerome and Sulab are the leaders of the developer user group. I don't know that either of them are here. If you are, just yell, and I'll give you a moment to talk about what you've got going on. Hearing nothing, we will move on. Some of what's coming up next for us is the admin user group. July 20th is our meeting next, and I believe this one is at Holmes Murphy. Is that right? I got it right, Carissa? All right, good.
Yes, Holmes Murphy in July.
All right, and it'll be on Salesforce architecture. So it's taking a look at a lot of the architectural tools that Salesforce has available out on their websites. I'm not positive who is going to be presenting at that, but I'm trying to get a really smart local person to do that conversation for you. Just need to get that confirmed yet. So we'll hope to see you on site at Holmes Murphy on July 20th. That will be a hybrid meeting as well. So if you can't join in person gets food though. So, it's hard not to have a good excuse to come out for food. And then August 17th, we're going to talk about platform events. Either Clarissa or I will be leading that one. And then September 21st, we will talk about flows, some design techniques there. DevOps in October. For those of you who are interested in that topic, there's a lot going on, and how that all impacts admins is something that will be really interesting. And it's kind of in a mature, growing up stage. So there's been a lot of learning and trying to figure out how that all works. And so if you've got any experience with that, I'd love to be able to talk to you about your experience on the DevOps side for the admins. We'll talk again on flow in November, and then we'll have our normal annual holiday mingle and jingle sometime in December. So we hope that you'll all make those events a priority. I think they all are posted now. So we spammed you a lot last month with all of those postings. And so hopefully you'll be able to sign up and make those events. I like how things didn't line up when I go into presentation mode, but upcoming events that are outside of our area, Force Landia in Portland, Oregon. You would miss the user group meeting for the nonprofits if you go to that. So stay here. Tahoe Dreaming. Tahoe Dreaming is a really nice location if you want a little bit of a vacation along with a Salesforce education. That one's July 20th. Midwest Dreaming. I think there's very little excuse for none of us to miss Midwest Dreaming. It's in Minneapolis. Fantastic event. It's not very expensive. It's just really straight on learning. It's a great opportunity to participate in that. Followed immediately by Witness Success. Same hotel, same conference space, both of them just back to back. Dreamforce is in September, the 12th through the 14th. So get yourselves ready for that big event as well. Our Slack channel, if you are interested in that. And with that, I will say thank you so much for coming. We're glad that you're here. And I'm so happy to have Michelle here with us as well. And I'm going to simply turn it over to her to talk to us about Agile. And maybe, Michelle, if you want, you can give a little bit of background and introduction as well.
I kind of have some of that baked in. So let me start off and get my screen share going. I'm using a office that is not wanting to be very cooperative with me. Hold on one second here while I get that going. There we go. Un momento. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Hold on one second. Okay.
There it comes.
Okay. Let's go. Okay. So, when Terry had asked me to do this a little while ago, I was like, "Are you sure, Terry, you want me to present on Agile?" And he's like, "Yes, I do." I'm like, "Okay, so here we go." And then shortly right after that, for those of you who know Jackie Askelson, really good friend of mine that I've worked with in many different arenas as well too. And she's like, "Yes, you're coming to the user groups." I'm like, "Okay, so here we go." Terry gave this a name of wearing your Salesforce hats. And my name's Michelle Ehrich. I'm the director of sales technology for DotDash Meredith. As Terry alluded to earlier, if you weren't on yet, DotDash Meredith, most of the Des Moines area knows us as just Meredith, but we were recently acquired, where a lot of that acquisition started at the end of 2021, and we really kind of started that process in 2022. If for anybody who's been through that M&A process, it's fun, to say the least. When I came into DotDash Meredith, they had just completed the Salesforce integration of combining a couple different instances together. And anybody who knows the M&A world, again, you have a short period of time to get everything shoved into one little channel, and then you go back and then you worry about where all the dead bodies are, or where all the cleanup that you have to do, everything like that. So that's kind of the state that we're in right now from a Salesforce perspective, and we're really working on doing a lot of that cleanup. Terry has been by our side on a lot of this stuff, contracting with us, so he's familiar with the process and the areas that we're focusing on as well. So that's who I am. Everybody at nauseam has been through Agile presentations. Okay. I don't want to make you guys sit through an Agile presentation because we all know about what the basics are and stuff. So I kind of was flying back last night from New York, and I'm like, you know what? I think we just need to tell my story. I'm an inquisitive person. I like to challenge some of the areas where what are the norms? Where can we benefit? Where can we make things better? And I guess this is just my story of where I got to. So hopefully along the way, maybe there's some of these issues or problems or things that might resonate with you. Maybe there's going to be some things that you're like, ooh, let's talk about that a little bit more, type stuff like that. I love it to be an open conversation, because one of the things that has moved me through my career, and especially in the Des Moines market, is really talking to a lot of other people who are doing a lot of the same practices that we are, and learning from each other what has worked well for you, what has not worked well. So if anybody's willing to set down their taco and just join the conversation briefly, you don't have to come off camera, but you can actually talk. So anyway, just kind of a little bit of an overview there. So I kind of just started off because I was like, what makes me an expert? I'm not. Okay. I do have my PMP. I did go for my project management professional certification in 2018. And from 2018, after I did that, I decided, maybe I should just go for my MBA in project management, because that sounds like a really good idea, right? Which it was a pandemic thing. Okay. I was bored. I had nothing to do. So I did it. It's fine. I'm glad I did it. But there were moments that I really questioned myself on that one. And then I do also have some of the Agile certifications. Most of the stuff that I will talk to you about today has really come from a definition from the product, project, and probably customer facing side of things, because that's the angle that I come at. That's where my career has been. I'm not a developer. Okay. I've led a lot of developer teams. I've led a lot of teams that have different roles, but I am not a developer. I really focus on the product project side of things. So what led me here really was a curiosity to say, how can we blend Agile and project management? Because I was finding that if you did one versus the other, there were so many things that were lacking in between. So I used the meme of course you're curious. I'm sorry, you're so confused. Everybody's confused about Agile. And if you've ever tried to have a conversation with a sales team or an outside customer to say, when are they going to get their project? And they're like, well, we're going through the sprint right now. And that sprint might or might not, they don't know about that stuff. They don't care about that stuff. So anyway, that's kind of how I got there. So, and Terry, you're monitoring you're monitoring questions, right? Okay. So quick background about me. I started my career in the federal government space. I've always been in the state of Iowa, so we were doing a lot of civilian contracting for the federal government with the old waterfall methodology, and that's probably going to date me and expose my age. But when we started, fun fact, I was working with the Federal Bureau of Prisons and the Iowa Department of Corrections. So I've been in a lot of those institutions, got to learn a lot about that side of the world. But, we did the waterfall practice. And there's a lot of things that I did like about the waterfall, because before a single piece of code was written, you had everything that you needed to know at that time for everything that was going to be practiced or that you were going to develop. Now, it took us about a year, right over a year, to develop that entire scope document, which may or may not arguably been thicker than the Iowa tax code, by the way. I mean, it was massive. Then we go to develop it. 2.5 years later, we rolled it out to our first prison. And guess what? Gosh darn it, they didn't have everything that they needed, because everything that we had scoped out, a few things had changed. The government changed their rules, because the government never changes their rules. But then we had to go in and we had to make modifications, or you would think that all prisons run exactly the same, but they don't. So the next prison that you go to, they have to make a slight tweak. And all of a sudden, all these change orders start coming in. And now you're managing that process. So that's kind of where I started. I'm not going to lie to you, from a product standpoint, I kind of geeked out over the learning and the knowledge and really becoming a subject matter expert on that side. And I've always said in the background of my mind, if waterfall gave us nothing, it gave us education, because you really had most of the knowledge that you needed to make really educated decisions about what you were developing on. Personal opinion, but it took a little while to get there, but we had that. And then after I left the prison world, I went into the SaaS, or what I call SaaS model-ish, because there's a lot of companies out there that claim to be a SaaS company, but you know that they're really not, but they're trying to get there. So went into that space for the reward and recognition. This was the first space that I was introduced to Agile. And it's right when Agile was coming into the Des Moines market. And here we are. We went head first. Every ceremony that you could possibly practice, we practiced it. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, I hated every ounce of it. I hated the word Agile. I hated anything having to do with it. I was like, no way. This is too much work. It's too many meetings. It's dedicated solely. The only people benefiting this is the developers. From a product perspective, I'm having to work twice as hard for this. That was my thought, right? So yeah. I was there in that space for about 5 years. Then I landed back in the federal space because it was a really easy transition for me. And I'm not going to lie to you, I may have went back to that space because they weren't practicing Agile. Shock of all shocks, 2 months after I started that, joke's on me. Hey, by the way, we're converting to Agile. Are you kidding me? But the difference is when we implemented that Agile experience, we actually took a tour of a lot of companies in the Des Moines market and looked at how they were using Agile. And it was the first time that I was actually opened up to the Agile experience to say, you don't have to do every single ceremony or every single practice that Agile says to be Agile. And I'm like, okay, I can probably work with this. I think this is okay. The other thing that kind of happened within that space was we really became very project focused as well too, because we were in a space that we were trying to become an industry leader in that federal space. So we had large chunks of work that we were doing. Some things that would take 2 years to build, and something that takes 2 years to build is really hard to do in an Agile environment, because my leader at that time said, well, we can't roll out anything until it's all done. It has to be an all or nothing. And I'm like, well, that's not how Agile works, guys. We have to figure out a way to balance it. So that's when I started getting really curious to say, is there a way that I can blend project management and Agile into the same phase? It was also while I was at this nonprofit. That's where I got my PMP. I got that in 2018. So I really kind of went back into that space to say, there has to be something that we can do. And I'll kind of elaborate on that here in just a little bit as well, too. I then went and worked in some nonprofit space, did a little bit of help setting up nonprofit instances for some local businesses. I'm not going to call out any businesses by name because I don't have their permission to do so. So I'm going to try my best not to do that. And then that's when I finally moved into the DotDash Meredith space. To be truthful, when I moved into the DotDash Meredith space, the one thing that my leader was looking at was somebody who had a different way of looking at the current situation or the current way in which things were being done. Yes, he wanted Salesforce experience, but if you just came in with Salesforce experience, he wanted something that would challenge the methodology and how we're really working things out. And I would probably say it was more of I believe me when I say this, I get the irony of this situation. It was more of my Agile experience that brought me to this job than it was my Salesforce experience, which is funny to a certain extent. So now I don't hate Agile. I don't anymore. I think that we just all have to do a little bit of a better job of announcing or analyzing what we do and do not use. So I've been in the Salesforce space for a little over 10 years. I've been on the implementation side. I'm on the development side here now with, managing. Right now I have 2 teams that I'm managing, and then I'm also bringing on potentially 3 more teams into my Salesforce arena that I'll be managing. But I've also been on the side as a Salesforce consumer customer and a member of I was consuming Salesforce as part of another website that I was developing. So I've kind of seen Salesforce from a couple different angles. So that's a little bit about my background. Sorry, and I'm dry mouth here. So I have a couple just basic beliefs that I kind of follow from a high level. I think there is a delicate balance between the agile and project management world. Somebody, when I was doing some interviews before I landed here at DotDash Meredith, somebody said, do you think that there is a place where a project manager and a scrum master can coexist on the same team? And I'm like, absolutely. They're two different roles. And they're like, yeah, but they both keep wanting to drive development towards the end. And I'm like, no, they're two different roles. Project manager is really looking at the overall health and well-being of the project. A scrum master is really looking at the development cycle and how they're collaborating, coordinating. So I think as long as you know your lanes and really work together, you could have a really successful project. When I took my PMP, I did the PMP version 5. Oh, Terry, was there a question? Oh, I took the PMP version 5. And at that time, PMP did not recognize Agile at all. They were still you had to choose. It was either Agile or it was project management. On the version 6 of the PMP, all of a sudden PMP said, yep, there's a place that we can coexist. And I think that there's a place that we all need to kind of play nicely together. And I think in the PMP world, in their defense, project managers don't just manage technology. They handle construction projects. They handle, engineering projects. They handle all the other things that go along with it. So they were a little bit slow to adapt Agile, but let's be real. Agile can live outside of development, right? You could do an Agile Kanban board for development or for construction, for any of that other stuff too. So I think it took a little while for those worlds to come together. But now if you go out and look at your project or you look at your Agile certifications and job boards out there, there is Agile project managers. Does anybody have an Agile project manager at their office? Maybe not. Maybe no one.
Yeah, feel free to raise your hand or use emotions if you want. And Dylan, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say I threw something in chat on that.
Yep.
It kind of touches about it, but it's experience with product management or product ownership. So from the Agile project manager perspective, there is the aspect of product ownership in our organization. So I was just wondering if you might be able to speak to anything along those lines.
So as into how we manage it, or can you be a little bit more specific?
Yeah, just the ideology around, like, you're talking pretty specifically about Agile and project management, not necessarily including product. So I don't know if that's just an assumption.
So actually, and great call out. Thank you for that. I think within the Agile, I always kind of just rely on product per se, because that's part of the Agile. In project management, they have what's business analyst, and they can, they have their requirements. That's how they do it. Let's be real. A business analyst and a product manager can cover the same role. I think a product manager is really good at breaking down the workforce and really breaking down the tasks that are really needed to do to go through the Agile processes. A business analyst is going to be out there really kind of pulling a lot of the requirements, getting a feel for the customer as a part of the overall project per se. I think from how we coexist, especially with the project and the product, I think a business analyst and a product manager or a product owner would be two of the most powerful combinations of people that you could put in a team. And people are like, but wouldn't they be bored? And I'm like, not at all. Depending upon the size of the projects that you're working on as well, too. You have your subject matter expertise that goes along with, being able to really extract that data and pushing those information and requirements out there. But then you have your product owner or product manager, however you want to put that, really driving that back with the development and making sure that development understands. In an ideal world, I would have both right now. I have a business analyst that's serving as a project product manager as well, or a product owner as well. And she struggles to a certain extent because it's a lot. You're sitting up there trying to do all the other stuff while you're also trying to feed to the customers. You're trying to be the SME. You're trying to do the training. You're trying to do all the different things like that. So I think that there is an interesting world that is not that far ahead of us, where we really start to encompass product, business analysts, project managers, Scrum Masters. Does that answer your question, Dylan, or am I rambling?
No, I think it's good. I am just cross-referencing the experience that I have with it. So I'm trying to make sure I understand
Yeah. Can you define a little bit what your experience has been?
Yeah. I mean, we have product ownership, no explicitly defined product management, but it is done in the form of a committee rather. So it is different in that aspect, which I find interesting, but I'm in agreement with you in terms of the way that business analysts and product ownership and product or project management all align, because from my perspective, I used to be in the product ownership space. And now I'm in the Salesforce space. And everything that I've learned up to this point has helped me in understanding just all of the ecosystem together.
Do you find it to be chaos if you don't, or like a lot of chaos driven or like incomplete requirement type driven stuff if you don't have somebody specifically in that space where it's more of a committee format?
I think it's interesting how work is prioritized. I know that's a very vague answer to your question, but
no, but I totally get what you're throwing down on that.
Okay.
You don't want to get anybody in trouble here. We're not calling anybody out, but yes, I get that.
It's a certain sense of chaos. Yes.
Yes. But really, if you take a look at it, and, I say that you can kind of pick and choose what types of things as I go through this, I said, one of my many beliefs is many of the principles and the methodologies that you use can be carried across to other industries in any size of team. But on my bullet point number 3, teams do not need to practice all ceremonies to practice the methodologies, but I do believe that you need to have the people in place. So one of the definitions, and this from living in this world as well, that product owner, man, you protect the team at all costs. You protect the prioritization, you protect the chaos, you protect all that other stuff that comes into your stream of work. And if you don't have anybody there who's kind of protecting that chaos can get very overwhelming.
Very much so. Yeah. And I think from the product ownership side of things, you can only do so much depending on who your product managers are and where. And I think that's where you have that next layer is the management of the chaos from a product management perspective should always be there. And in some organizations that just doesn't exist. Granted, I only have the experience from one company, so that's not across the board by any means, but just so far what I've seen.
Yeah, no, and I thank you for sharing your experience as well too, because I truly believe, and Terry can attest to the level of chaos that I had when I walked in, and we'll kind of describe a little bit more through there, but really kind of protecting that level of chaos. Guess what? When you have less chaos, you make more work, you get things out faster. But yet at the same time, you still have leadership that's up here who's saying, but I want this, this, and this, and I need it before anything else, which is invoking more chaos into it. And if you don't have that layer of protection, most development teams will really struggle. And I mean, struggle in the fact that you're not putting out quality, you're not putting out quantity, and you're not really driving timelines because there's not just one person invoking or like who's speaking up to say what their prioritization is. So, yeah. I think the other thing, and I'll call out on this one too, to give you a little bit of an example where I am right now with, teams have to be willing to adjust and recognize when what they're doing is not meeting the need of the entire team, but take that a step farther, you guys. What happens if it's not meeting the need of the entire audience? And that means your customers, your end users, all that other stuff. So to give you an example, when I came into DotDash Meredith, And again, I am not dogging on my team whatsoever. I came in, we had just gone through the merger and acquisition. It was chaos. Terry, how many weekly releases were we doing prior? I mean, we were doing hot fixes, like 5, 6 a week. Guess what happens when you do a hot fix 5 or 6 times a week? All the stuff that you said that you were developing isn't getting developed because everybody is distracted, right? So when I came in, I kind of sat back for 2 weeks, but if you know my personality, I probably don't sit back that often and I'm not that quiet. So I maybe sat back for a week and said, okay, hold on, guys. First of all, you're doing monthly releases. And you moved to doing monthly releases because you had a lot of carryover of information and you weren't getting the stuff churned out in time because you have so much chaos over here. So we're doing monthly releases. We're not finishing our sprint commitments and we're doing a ton of off-cycle releases. What can we do? So one of the first things that I said, guys, we need to go to a 2-week sprint cycle. And they're like, why? Why would we do that? And I said, if we go to a 2-week sprint cycle, we're going to get things out faster to the customer to hopefully minimize the chaos, right? And they're like, no, we're never going to get enough tickets through. And they always ask for all this other stuff. And I said, here's the thing, guys, we have to have communication. So I went out to the product, or who I would consider the main person who was ingesting a lot of product requests into our sprint board. And I said, I'm going to make a deal with you. If I go to every 2-week releases, can you agree that we're going to cut down, if not eliminate, our off-cycle releases? And he goes, yeah, sure, I'm good with that. That's fine. So I'm like, well, that was easy. I was kind of waiting for a little bit of a debate on that one. And he's like, part of the reason we're doing the hot fixes is because by the time it gets into the sprint board, it may take a month to get into the sprint board because they're always working on everything else. And then you have to wait a month for the development to happen to be able to get released. And now they're 2 months out and they still don't have their, thing. So I think communication is going to be key along the way. But if you have a mature team, or even if you have one person who is standing up and saying, something's not working for my team, something's not working for my audience, I would encourage anybody to go back and say in a collective way, or even just with leadership, to say, what do we need to do to adjust it? The first thing that I will tell you, the team is going to be resistant to change. Okay. My development team they thought I was crazy going to a 2-week sprint cycle. And they were like, no. And I said, here's what I'm going to do to make this a little bit easier on you as well, too. We're not going to do a standard sprint or a scrum. We're going to do Scrum-Bon. I'm not asking you to commit to everything that you're going to do in a 2-week period, but I promised our outside entities that we are going to be releasing every 2 weeks. So if we have a commitment that we release every 2 weeks on a Thursday, anything that's developed and all the way through QA, we are going to release it. And that's what it is. On the same point, we had to take a look at how things were flowing through our board and how things were flowing through our board. Where do you think that the one place that all of our stuff was getting hung up at? It was our own processes, guys. Our own processes. Our QA process, I love our QA team. Don't get me wrong. They do an excellent job, but they may have been QAing for NASA prior to QAing for us, because we were not building mission critical systems here, and they were doing an excellent job, but not every ticket had to be a regressive ticket. Okay. We had to have the conversation with them to say, how can we modify the process to move through the system faster? But then not only that, we were waiting for every ticket to be approved and validated by our customer before we could release it. And I'm like, we don't have to do that. If we know everything that they want, we can go ahead and say, yeah, we're good with it. We may want to have them validated. That's fine if it's a more complicated, but not every ticket needs to have somebody else sign off on it before we release it. So just by even just a couple going from a Scrum to a Scrum-Bon, going from a 4-week sprint to a 2-week sprint, and modifying our QA process. Terry, what percentage of chaos would you say that we reduced? I have my own personal number. I want to hear it from somebody else.
I would say probably 60 to 70%.
And that was just within that first period of time. You're still going to have a little bit of chaos and you're going to have that interjection. But I think that as well as just being able to kind of look back at your team and say what's not working might get you a little bit farther. Is anybody, I'm reading Kristen here, have not looked at many events. Oh, okay. So that was some different stuff. Is anybody having any struggles or chaos with their team right now that they are thinking, hey, it's not working for us, we need to reevaluate? We'll keep monitoring the chat for any of those that are kind of coming through.
Yeah, feel free to unmute as well and have a conversation if you'd like. If something resonates with you and you have some questions, feel free to.
Sure. Hey, Michelle.
Yeah.
I'm Eric. I'm actually a Scrum Master. So,
Love it.
Yeah. But I'm curious. So Scrumban, you had mentioned that the code quality was a problem. I'm curious how reducing the sprint length and reducing the QA kind of overhead improved code quality.
You know, interestingly enough, code quality wasn't really an issue that I really saw from the beginning. Of our hot fixes that we were putting out, a lot of it wasn't bug related. We had a few bugs, don't get me wrong, but a lot of it was more so of like last minute, this is due to the merger and acquisition. We have to make some changes because now the business made a change. We had really strong development that knew the system well. So I would say from a code quality standpoint, we had some great stuff there. I will also say from a requirements feature, we had to really challenge the team to make sure that we were writing requirements and we were doing what we needed to in that arena. I would say that's still a growth project, but interestingly enough, and as a Scrum Master, you may shiver at this, they were never talking about the tickets collectively as a team before they started working on them. So you would pull a ticket into your sprint process and then you would just like, here it is. Where's our understanding? Are you sure you're developing everything that you need to? Luckily, for the most part, there was some good understanding with some of that. But is QA testing the same things? So even just to reinforce the code quality on that one, we started doing some extra ceremony in the fact of sprint planning or sprint grooming to say, let's go through these tickets and make sure that everybody knows what the heck is going on and we know what's happening, because I don't know how many show of hands here who has a complex Salesforce system. I don't know of a non-complex Salesforce system at my point anyway. If you have one, I'd love to see it. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, you had mentioned the hot fixes, so I was kind of curious about that side of it. The other side of it for us, the approval process, right? Audit is obviously a big deal. I work kind of at a bank, we would say, and so we do the auditors require type of that sign off, whether it's maybe not necessarily from the business stakeholder, but from a product owner at least. I am curious. In this scenario you described, because it sounds like you're using Scrum, but not either correctly, or I'm curious, did you have a Scrum Master on this team? Like what was going on in the retros where, I mean, the team was feeling during this time? There's a lot to unpack here and I don't want to steal the whole time, but
no, there's so much to unpack there and great questions. I love it. Interestingly enough, at DotDash Meredith, we don't have Scrum Masters. We had people playing the role. We have people who did not have any formal education or training in the Scrum world, and they started applying practices and principles to the best of their ability from what they knew or what they read or what was carried over. So from the retrospective standpoint, different things like that, I would say that when I came in, I kind of stepped in as a little bit more of a Scrum Master. I try not to because I'm also leadership. So I think it's different just a position to say, hey, as a leader, you should also be a Scrum Master. I don't really believe in that, but that was kind of what we needed for that time to get the team moving in the right direction.
Sure.
I would love to hire a Scrum Master. I'm still working on that one. Sure. And as we onboard more teams, like especially if I have, 4 or 5 different teams that are using Agile and are developing on Salesforce, as a Scrum Master, you could essentially, manage a couple of those teams and really kind of help drive that forward, and letting the managers or the leaders do what they need to do to kind of support that role as well too.
Sure. Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that one, because been there, done that. And I played the Scrum Master role for a while on that one. Can you speak to performance evaluation within the Agile Scrum project management space for various roles, perhaps specifically devs? Have you seen a manager role in addition to other roles? Does the PM serve as a manager? So great questions on some of that. I'm kind of skimming past part of that. So I'm going to try and get, that one's a little bit of a longer question, but I'm going to try and get to a lot of it. I think that when it comes to a Scrum Master or a project manager, they should never have HR authority over development or anybody that is within that role. Because guess what happens? And it's the same thing when you're leading a retrospective. I'm very firm with the team. I don't want to lead the retrospective, guys. I don't want to. It's not that I don't want to, but if you have a management or a leadership who's actually in that role, you have your direct reports that are like, well, that's what my manager says, so that's what I have to do. So they're less likely to really kind of step up when maybe something's not going correctly or have that voice. So from a performance management standpoint, I'm a firm believer that leadership should not be in that role. Now, am I violating my own belief in that one? Absolutely, I am. But we're working on bringing other people into that, so that way I can take a true leadership role and kind of make that Scrum Master / project manager into more of that operational role. I really see it a difference between operations and management from a, overall. But I will say that in the course of most of my experience in Des Moines, there are a lot of leadership people taking Scrum Master type roles. Do you see a lot of that, or is that kind of where that question generated from?
Yeah. My previous experience was that the manager role was outside of the Scrum team, but obviously the Scrum team needed some strong leadership within it, or at least influential leadership to take accountability and hold others accountable. So I kind of wanted to speak to that, like that piece of like having the manager role separate from the team, and that creating like an interesting kind of disconnect sometimes. But I do see and understand why you wouldn't have like a actual manager above any of the Scrum team because of that. Less likely to actually participate and fully engage in it.
Yeah. Well, and it makes it harder on the manager too, because you really have to be there to support the team, but then you also have to be there on the defense of the team as well too, when you have those outside interferences like, oh, well, you don't want to do what I'm asking you to do. Let me take this to the next level, because everybody's going to go around that. But I firm believer in it, because I think that's where you get the most health. And I think you get a higher functioning team when it comes to working with each other, when it comes to all of that stuff. People just have a higher maturity when leadership is not perceived as it in every meeting, overseeing everything, micromanagement type stuff like that. Yep. In my previous role, before coming here, I did not attend the daily stand-ups. I did not attend the retrospectives. I did attend occasionally when they were pulling in for like oversight, just to kind of figure out where the team was going. But I had a really strong product manager that would really kind of keep me in the loop as to what was going on. But I didn't need to interject my opinion into it, because I wanted to show that she had the ability to do it. But the team also needed to understand that she had the authority to do it as well too. Because if I was always coming in and saying, this is what needs to happen, I just ruined the dynamic of the team.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I do agree. It is a long drive to Minnesota, by the way, Tracy. I get bored after 2 hours. So right there with you, sister. Okay. Is there any other questions that I hadn't answered yet? Sorry, I was just scrolling through some of those.
I think you got them.
Okay. And some people doing the 3-week release cycles, QA also slow. QA is always going to be a standout, guys. It usually is at some point going to be a barrier. It may not be a bad barrier though, but it's usually going to be a little bit there. So you're not alone in that arena. Agile and PMP perceptions. Okay. I'm going to be fully transparent with you guys. I had some of these perceptions in my early days. Okay. I did. But one of the biggest things in coming at it from a product and project standpoint, especially when you're working with the outside teams, these perceptions are still in existence today. Okay. Projects take too long and they require too many meetings. And I don't really want to have to go through the project. And good Lord, how much do we really need to do here? Agile only benefits the developers and everybody else has to work because developers are the only ones who benefit from this work breakdown and et cetera. Project management will slow down timelines. All of the things that were there. Okay. These are perceptions that are out there in the workspace. They're still out there. I still hear them on a daily basis. I actually was flying back from New York yesterday, and I was having a conversation with another fellow colleague within the company, and we were talking about a project that's coming down the line that we're deprecating some systems. And the first thing they're like, I just can't sit through another project management meeting and all the things that go along with it. I agree. It can be a little bit overwhelming, but what I will, and these are some of my favorite memes. Okay. I love them because welcome to Agile. There's where stories are made up and points don't matter. And then on the same time, you say there's no deadlines in Agile. So we're going to ask for story points and treat them as deadlines, because then no one wants to give me an accurate point. If you're using a Fibonacci, well, it's probably a 5, but I'm going to give it an 8 just because you're going to treat it as a deadline. And then, whatever. I will say that in the say Agile one more time, I was probably in that camp for a little while in my first Agile experience. And then tell me why Agile hasn't worked for you before. Because you weren't doing it. You weren't doing Agile at all. Guess what? I love the fact that when Agile was first introduced, everybody's like, you have to do every single step of Agile to be Agile. It completely defies the whole purpose of Agile. You can pick and choose what you need to do to meet your system or to meet your team requirements. So I love some of these because that it really did go to speak to, oh, my cursor. It really did go to speak to where we are in a, me seeing the Willy one. Yeah. So anyway, that's some of the perceptions, that's some of the stuff that's out there. So let me talk really quickly from the uniqueness of the Salesforce. And this is where I think project management from the Salesforce standpoint, especially when you're talking with the M&A and different things like that have been going on. And even when you're really looking at, if I were to say from a Fibonacci standpoint on our side, anything over a 13-point story, that might be a multiple ticket story. I think there's elements that you can take from project management, really of that full scope definition. But from a project management perspective, on Salesforce, one feature or one large epic, you could be affecting integration, sales teams, support teams, reporting for leadership, forecasting, email marketing, financials, everything that kind of goes along with it. And you have to make sure that everybody's at the table, but having everybody at the table can be really hard and overwhelming as well too. So you have to make sure that you're able to address the need of the business with having everybody at the table. I'll do one quick story. At my previous position, we had an integration that we were going to do for Salesforce. At the time, I was a consumer of Salesforce. We had 2 different lines of business. Both of us were going to have to utilize this new integration. They were going to integrate one line of business at a time. They picked the other business first and said, we're going to get them onboarded. We're going to then come over to you. You're going to onboard. They get the other line of business onboarded. They come over to me and they say, yep, okay, we're ready. Let's get you signed up. I said, give me the requirements. Let me see what's going on. And I read through the requirements and I said, well, this project is dead in the water because you guys just consumed a Salesforce ID that is a shared ID between both lines of businesses. And my other line of business just consumed the ID and I have no ID to consume. And they're like, yeah, but that's not going to be that big of a deal. That's only 3% of the audience. And I said, for the line of business number 1, it's 3% of the audience. For my line of business, it's 45. And they're like, what? And I said, 45% of my business equals 3% of their business. And I can't integrate right now. And if they would have had me at the table on the first meeting, even though they were implementing me later, if I would have been at the table right away, we would have had a more successful project. So it is really that juxtaposition to say who should be there. And really the implementation of the project after it was done didn't really take a whole lot to do. But from the project standpoint, have the right people at the table to discuss what needs to be done. So then from the Agile standpoint, one feature broken down into different categories of work, you could have your admin doing some work. You could have your admin doing some process-driven work. You could have some custom code. You could have some integration, some architectural stuff, data management, all the different things. Take it down to even training aspects, documentation, all the different things that you have to do. Those things have to be managed, and who's managing that? So I'll kind of go back to Dylan's. I think it was Dylan's comment originally. If you don't have a product owner, who's managing that work? I'd love to hear from Dylan, who's managing that work on your side, by the way, also, if you're kind of practicing that Agile methodology, but all of that work needs to get done. And are you properly identifying all of the work that does need to get done and who's doing it?
Yeah, so we do have product owners, and the product owners do the management prioritization. But then there's the second layer of the committee actually prioritizing what priority is. It's convoluted, but that's essentially how it works.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Thank you. So really from a uniqueness of Salesforce, how I've really kind of come to take a look at it, how do you approach a new feature, a change that impacts all of these things with multiple audiences, multiple, aspects of implementation, your release, your business and stuff? I've really come at it. I start at a project level. I take a look at it and say, how much of this really needs to be identified, addressed, even before I get the team involved? Because guess what? As soon as I start talking about it to the team, they want to start working on it now because it's new and great and everybody wants to see something new. But really, I have to tackle it from a project standpoint to make sure I have completeness and continuity. And then I take it to the Agile perspective. And this is where I really kind of see it all come together to say you have those people coming from that product standpoint, really kind of tying a lot of this stuff together with the different methodologies and then turning it over to the Agile side, which leads to a little bit more of a successful project because you're really taking it from the very inception of the idea to implementation successfully. And then the blend of the methodologies, I really say you take what you want and leave the rest, just like a salad bar. Sometimes your plate's a little bit fuller on a project that you might be working on. Sometimes you might just have a ticket that you're passing through and not everything has to go through projects. So you might just be taking some cottage cheese from the salad bar. But other times you are going to be filling up that plate in several layers. You really need to be able to disassemble those layers and make it into workable units and break them into little salad plates that you're going to hand off to your development team. I like memes, by the way. I just think they add a little bit something more than just words on a page. So, key points for me, definition of a project. Hey, it has a start and an end date, or a start and an end point, not necessarily a date. And it has a definition of content that you're going to put into it. So if you're working on something that seems to be a little bit bigger than just a story, I'd encourage you maybe just to take a look at it from a little bit of a grander aspect of it. Does everything have to be a project? No. Expand your thought process and see what happens after this goes to production. Expand your thought process to outside your development role. I think one of the things that in the Agile environment that kind of drove me crazy, I'm not necessarily saying this is so much right now, but before a developer in their role, well, I don't care what marketing's doing. I just care about what I'm developing. The development doesn't matter to, or marketing doesn't matter to me, but a lot of those things really do tie into the same overall aspect of what they're doing. So I think it's really good to let people know what's happening outside of their own role and identify that stuff early. Does everything need to be in a ticket? Terry can attest to you. I think my number one thing that I say in a stand-up on a daily basis is that in a ticket, please document it. Documentation. If you have to ask, well, should I document it? Please say yes. Does it need to be called out anywhere? And if it's not in a ticket, how do you know who's managing it? So if I will never say if you get hit by a bus tomorrow, I always say if you win the lottery, because I think it's a much more positive thing. And I really wish that would happen to all of us. But if you win the lottery tomorrow and you're managing something that's happening within this, if it's not documented, who's picking it up when you call in and say, I just won the lottery and I'm not coming back to work? I think that all derives down to the process where you're kind of blending those two together. So lastly, just some pitfalls and takeaways. roadmaps, you guys, for me, I have worked in companies that people say, I'm not exposing my roadmap and I'm not telling anybody what I'm working on and I'm not telling anybody what's coming down the pipeline. Please open that up for your customers. That's a trust thing. Who cares what they think about it? But at least it gives them what they're seeing and what they're going to be able to see. There's a lot of people who don't believe in that. I think it's just a good thing to open that up. Help them understand what the process is. Lack of conversations will limit success. I firmly believe that. And you don't have to hire a PM to incorporate these methodologies. Like small steps can happen and can kind of help out, and you can kind of do that. And I'm leaving you with my LinkedIn handle. If I can help solve a problem in any way, reach out to me. I would love to collaborate with you. I would love to say, how are you handling this? And maybe I can expel some of my project management methodology on you to say how to help figure that, because project managers can be expensive and sometimes you don't need one all the time. Maybe you just need one a few times or a few concepts that will help you make some changes. So that's my take on Agile and project management in a 45-minute overview. What kind of thoughts do you guys have for me, or questions, or any benefit? Or are you like, this was an hour of my life I'm never going to get back?
Feel free to have questions. You guys have been great. I really appreciate the interaction today. It's fantastic. Anyone else have questions that Michelle can help with?
This really struck a chord with me, if you couldn't tell halfway through the presentation, but this was great. I very much enjoyed the conversation around everything that you're talking about here. I don't think there's a one size fits all, like you're saying. There's just plenty of ways that you can go about it. And I think there's plenty of places that any organization can learn from seeing a presentation like this.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is Des Moines is a rich community in Agile, and we have these little pockets of knowledge that are out there. But I mean, I truly do mean it. If there's anything that you guys want to run questions past, my LinkedIn handle is my first name, last name. Reach out to me, connect with me. I mean, I'm not a rocket science by any stretch of the imagination. I kind of saw the blend of where these two things can come, and I think it's worked really successfully for a lot of teams. So if there's something that I can help with, or maybe you guys are lacking on your team that I can help you maybe implement, let me know. I'll be glad to help. Man, I didn't think I was going to be able to talk for 45 minutes, Terry.
I had no problem thinking that you're going to talk for 45 minutes. I was worried about you shutting up before it was over.
Michelle, we got to end it right now. Yeah, no, just kidding.
I am curious though, because I think we do have some single admins, solo admins. How do you deal with this type of thing as a solo admin in the last couple minutes?
I'm the only admin on my team. This is Elisa. I work for a very small company. So I get pushed to some stuff that is probably a little more than I should do. And then we use a third party to help when we have to actually get to a developer. But I have to be really, really clear when, like you were saying, Michelle, like I need to know exactly what you want to do. Like, don't tell me how you think it's going to work. I have to really focus in on what are you really trying to do, end goal. And then I will go away and figure out how we can do that. But I also have to be super, super in touch with all our groups. To your point, like if I'm going to touch something in Pardot, I have to understand how that's going to sync over to Salesforce. I know marketing wants me to go bananas, but I also know I'm going to break stuff if I do that. And vice versa. You know, we've got, what are we doing with these leads? Well, we're just dumping them in there. What happens next? So it's a lot about asking the questions. And to your point, really being connected to all the different stakeholders in this company. Like everybody, they don't know, they only care about how their piece works. They don't know how it affects everybody else. So that's my job.
Silos are a real thing in every industry that's out there. And especially if you're really dealing with a lot of third party to kind of help you get through some of that as well too. That just complicates your situation 100%.
Yeah, I've been really fortunate. I mean, I've been here just shy of 5 years now, and they really are, at this point, we have established the trust that they know I'm going to ask a question. They know I'm not just going to throw stuff out there willy-nilly. But that is another thing that happens, like, well, how fast? Well, let's talk about what's really going to happen before we talk about how fast.
Right. Well, so I think you pointed on something on this one that is so critical too, because if you take the time to develop the trust and you build that relationship that they 100% know that you are going to take care of them, you are 3 steps ahead of where others are going to be on that one too, because that is one of the probably most valuable tools that you have to help you do your job. Because they trust what you're doing. They trust that you're going to take care of them, even if it's something that's going to maybe take them a little bit longer to get there, or they know that you're not giving them a line of BS just to get them off your back.
Absolutely. And that's a slow process, right? It is really getting connected to everybody. But in the beginning, we definitely would get a lot more like, we'll just go ahead and do it. And now when we say, oh, I have questions, they're like, okay, she's going to ask the questions, but we're going to close the loop. We're going to finish. And I think that's a big deal.
Well, and I always go like this too. Trust is really easy. Some people are really easy to give trust, but once it's broken, it's really hard to bring it back. So when you kind of continue on with that methodology that you're going through, you're really working on continuing to establish that trust and that relationship. And even if there is a slip up that something happens, you already have the track record that says, people make mistakes, but I'm going to make it right.
Yeah.
Very good. We are past our time, so I do want to let everybody get back to their day jobs. So thank you so much for coming. Michelle, thank you so much. This was really, really great. Good session. I loved, again, all the interaction from everybody. Thanks for coming. We'll see you next month. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Michelle on her LinkedIn, or reach out to Clarissa or I if we can support you at all in your Salesforce efforts. So,
or Terry knows how to get up to me too. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Michelle.
Bye.